Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Ms. Roney Reads. I know it's been a really long time since we've caught up, and I'm so excited to share some new books with you. I'd also like to do a quick shout out to my friend Riss. She won a competition that was around my birthday. So, hello, Riss. Welcome to Ms. Roney Reads. Today, I'm going to be reading for you the first chapter of The Boundless Sublime by Lili Wilkinson. Let's read the blurb and see if you'd be interested in reading it. The boy reached out and touched my arm. Even through my jumper and shirt, it made my skin burn. "You think you can hide inside your grief?" he said. "It doesn't work on me. I see you." Ruby Jane Galbraith is empty. Her family has been torn apart and it's all her fault. The only thing that makes sense to her is Fox, a gentle new friend who is wise, soulful, and clever, yet oddly naive about the ways of the world. He understands what she's going through and he offers her a chance to find peace. Fox belongs to a group called the Institute of the Boundless Sublime, and spending time with Fox means spending more and more time with his family. Soon, Ruby is drawn into what she discovers is a terrifying, secretive community that is far from the ideal world that she expected. Can she find the courage to leave? Is there any way she can save Fox too? And is there ever an escape from the far reaching influence of the Institute of the Boundless Sublime? A gripping novel about an ordinary girl who is unsuspectingly seduced into a modern day cult. Gosh, that sounds so intriguing. Let's read the first chapter, shall we? My name is Ruby Jane Galbraith, and I'm no messiah. For a long time, there was grief. It pulled me down into the suffocating darkness and kept me anchored there. I went through the motions. I turned up at school, I ate food and watched TV and took algebra tests, but I didn't feel anything. It was easier that way. Mum wasn't as good at hiding it as me. She stopped going to work and answering the phone and pulled the curtains of her sorrow tightly around herself. She sat all day in the living room, staring at the TV and smoking cigarette after cigarette. Sometimes I'd come home from school and find her vacant-eyed, with a perfect cylinder of ash protruding from pale lips. I'd speak to her, tell her about my day and the outside world, and it would take minutes for the cylinder to tremble and collapse, spilling ash down the front of her dressing gown. We ate frozen meals straight out of the plastic containers. I ordered them online with Mum's credit card, and we pretended not to be home when the delivery man came. Mum ate hers robotically, even when her teriyaki chicken was so hot from the microwave that it was burning her throat. Once I suggested we order pizza or Indian for some variety, but Mum shrank visibly before me, folding in on herself. The idea of having to answer the door and interact with a stranger was too much. I didn't suggest it again. My piano accumulated a thick layer of dust. I didn't even open the lid. Just seeing it there, crouching closed-mouthed in the corner of the living room, felt too loud. Music brought feelings, and our house was a feelings-free zone. I went out a lot, sneaking into nightclubs and losing myself in the thumping repetition of dance, staying long after my friends had left. I arrived home in the small hours of the morning, sweaty and exhausted, to find Mum still slumped on the couch with the home shopping channel shouting at her. She wouldn't look at me as I staggered to my bedroom and fell onto the bed, still fully clothed. It was the only way I could sleep, with my ears ringing from the club and my mind so numb that nothing could intrude. The blissful darkness would hold me for a few hours, and then I'd wake up and go to school, leaving Mum behind on the couch. We didn't talk about it. Ever. I saw the school counsellor a few times. Helena wore voluminous floral caftans and tinkling earrings. She advised me to keep a dream journal and start a herb garden. I did neither. When she asked me how I was feeling, I lied and told her I was okay. She told me I was making amazing progress. She told me I was brave. She told me her door was always open. "How is your music going, dear?" she asked one grey, wintry afternoon. My what? Your music. Mr. Andrews tells me you're a very talented composer and pianist. When I was little, the word pianist used to make me snigger. I watched the bright wooden parrots swinging from Helena's earlobes. I said, okay. "You know, music can be healing, a very therapeutic way to express and process grief." I made obedient and understanding noises. I didn't want to express or process my grief. I wanted to be left alone in the deep darkness. Nothing could hurt me down there because I couldn't feel. You should write a song, said Helena, and dedicate it to Anton. I felt ripples in the black tide and let it draw me in deeper. There would be no songs. Not now, not ever. Nothing to fill the void. Promise me you'll try. Helena leaned forward. Sure, I lied. I'll try. I have something for you, she said, her eyes bright. She fished around in her handbag and pulled out a little silk bag. I took it, spilling its contents into my palm. A string of beads like bubbled orange glass. I blinked. Helena had bought me jewellery? They're amber, she said. They have healing properties. Was she serious? I know it sounds crazy, she said with a self deprecating eye roll, but it's actually scientifically proven. The heat of your skin causes a chemical reaction that releases a certain kind of oil from the crystal. Resin, I said. I'm sorry? Amber is resin, I told her, not a crystal. Helena shrugged this off. Scientifically proven, indeed. Anyway, the oil is absorbed by the skin. Mothers use these beads for teething babies. They can cure eczema and asthma, as well as providing an overall feeling of peace and well-being. I thought you could use some of that. What a load of bullshit. Surely if amber did secrete some magic oil so powerful that merely holding it against your skin was enough to produce an analgesic effect and cure miscellaneous ailments, then people wouldn't be putting it on tiny babies, especially not patchouli-scented people like Helena, who probably didn't believe in vaccination or pasteurized milk. That was what I should have said to her. It's what the old Ruby would have done. I should have told her that there was no way a string of old sap was going to mend my broken heart or pull me up out of the darkness. But I didn't say that. I thanked her politely. I didn't want to be healed. Mina was waiting for me outside Helena's office. She didn't ask me how I was. That was the good thing about my friends. They didn't ever try to get me out to talk about my feelings. They understood me. Mina's hands were smeared with red, black, and gold, her black jeans torn and splattered with the flecks of oil paint hardened to a shiny crust. Been in the studio? I asked. She nodded. Still not sure what to do for my final composition, she said. We're supposed to be designing items of furniture, but that sounds so utilitarian. I want to make a monster. I'm really into monsters at the moment. The grotesque, you know? You could make a couch that eats people, I suggested. Mina's dark lips curled into an ironic smile. I'm totally obsessed with this Goya painting of Saturn eating one of his sons. Goya painted it onto the wall of his house over some insipid inspirational thing he'd done earlier. He was depressed because he was sick and had gone deaf, and there was political shit going on in Spain. Saturn is looming up out of the shadows with this wild hair and gaping mouth. He's already eaten the baby's head and one arm, and is taking a bite out of the other arm. Everything is dark and muted except Saturn's bulging white eyes and the bright red blood on the baby. It's awesome. I nodded and tried not to picture it in my head. Sounds great, I said, but couldn't quite keep the wobble out of my voice. Mina looked away, suddenly uncomfortable. I need a coffee. When we were younger, we'd mostly hung out at my house. Mina's parents were strict Malaysian Catholic and didn't approve of any of her schemes or projects. When she'd pierced her nose, herself with a safety pin, they had gone ballistic. My parents were more laid back, but Mina didn't come to my house anymore. I hadn't said anything, hadn't told her about things at home, but she knew most of it and was a good enough friend to not bring it up. She also knew better than to ask me to visit the abandoned car park outside a boarded up old pub where we used to huddle on milk crates with Ali and Harrison and Flick, blowing out candles of breath steam and cigarette smoke in chilled air. I only saw the others at school now, and had the occasional coffee with Mina. We walked side by side down the empty corridor. As we passed a rubbish bin, I held out my arm and let the amber beads slip through my fingers to mingle with half-eaten sandwiches and banana peels. Auntie Kath flew down from Queensland to visit us. Her bronzed skin and bright clothes looked out of place in our house, where everything was cold and pale and ashen. She took one look at Mum, slumped on the couch in her dressing gown, and called Uncle Marco to tell him that she would be staying for quite a while, and could he send down some more clothes. She bustled Mum into the shower, chatting away as if nothing was wrong. She was relentlessly cheerful and bossy, making Mum wash her hair and put on actual clothes instead of the ash-dusted dressing gown which Auntie Kath insisted on throwing in the bin. Then she sat Mum back down on the couch and herded me back into the car. "Why didn't you call?" she said, her voice low so Mum wouldn't hear. "If I'd known she was like this, I would have come earlier." "Because we're doing fine. because we don't want you here, because we like it this way. I'm sorry, I said. I didn't want to worry you. Auntie Kath's lips pursed in concern and she put her arms around me, a fluttering, faint hug, like being embraced by a butterfly. You poor thing, she said. I know it's been difficult. Well, don't worry, I'm here now. I'll fix everything. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to hug her back, to bury my face in her shoulder and cry, to let her take care of us. But I couldn't. Auntie Kath set to work. She cleaned and scrubbed and disinfected. She went to the supermarket and filled our pantry with Tim Tams and smoked almonds. She made pumpkin soup and brewed pots of tea. She opened the curtains, filling our house with weak winter sun, and bought flowers to freshen the stale air. She threw Mum's cigarettes away. Mum did as Auntie Kath told her, obedient and passive. But even though she washed her hair and put on moisturiser and a bra, I could tell she was still the same inside. You could change the outside of a person with body lotion and flowers and hair conditioner, but there was nothing you could do to change the inside, especially when the inside of a person was blank, dark, and hollow. Poor Auntie Kath. She was trying so hard. I could see the effort it took to be that upbeat all the time. I knew she was hoping some of it would rub off on us, but we'd forgotten how to be cheerful. I knew how it would go. Eventually, Auntie Kath would give up. She'd go back to Queensland, and Mum would get back to her couch and her cigarettes. The flowers would die, the food in the fridge would rot, and Mum and I would crumble into ash again. I've got a special treat tonight, Auntie Kath said after dinner, one night tapping one of her gold rings against her wine glass. She got up and went to the fridge, returning with something large and fluffy, laden with fruit. I felt the steak I'd just eaten turn hard and cold in the pit of my stomach. Auntie Kath placed the platter in the centre of the dining table and disappeared back into the kitchen to get plates and cake forks. I know it's your favourite, Ruby, she said with a wink as she sat down at the table and sank a knife into the pavlova, breaking its meringue crust. Mum stiffened next to me as Auntie Kath served her a giant wobbling slice. It wasn't my favourite. Mum's face had turned the colour of bone. She stared down at her plate and fork. Auntie Kath looked at her face to mine and then sagged in understanding. I didn't need to try it. I could already taste the sweet creaminess and tart fruit mingling on my tongue. I wanted to throw up. Well, said Auntie Kath brightly, maybe it's a good thing. We should be celebrating Anton, enjoying the things he enjoyed in honour of him. She scooped up a forkful and pushed it into her mouth, closing her eyes in pleasure. My jaw clenched. I ground my teeth so hard that I imagined them shattering into fragments. The shards would slice open my gums, filling my mouth with the taste of blood instead of sugary cream and passion fruit. I'd spit them onto the plate, red flecked with sharp white. What if we all told a story about Anton? A happy memory. Mum started to rock gently back and forth, her face utterly blank. I left the table and escaped to my room. I texted Mina, but she didn't respond, probably busy working on her latest art project. I considered texting someone else, anyone, then decided it probably didn't matter. It was better to be alone. I pulled on a jacket and black boots and headed for the front door. Mum and Auntie Kath were still sitting at the table. Kath was talking to Mum in a low, soothing voice. Mum's face showed no expression. Ruby, it's nearly 8, called Kath. Where are you going? Out. The club was exactly as I wanted it to be, loud and enormous. It was anonymous. It was sleazy enough that I could slip in without showing any ID, but not so sleazy that I couldn't deter any groping hands with a swift elbow and a dark glare. I welcomed the dark, frenetic facelessness of the dance floor. Nobody stared at me with sympathetic frowns, wrinkling their brows. Nobody offered understanding hugs. Nobody shifted their weight uncomfortably as they tried to work out what to say. On the dance floor, I wasn't Ruby Jane Galbraith. I was just a body, jumping and writhing with all the other bodies. I wasn't anybody at all. A guy tapped me on the shoulder. Hey, he said, yelling into my ear to be heard over the music. Can I buy you a drink? I glowered at him and he backed off. I wasn't here to make friends. I was here to forget. I stayed until my clothes were soaked with sweat and I could barely stand from exhaustion. Then I wearily found a taxi and headed home. Does your mother know you stay out this late? It was after 3. Auntie Kath was sitting on the couch, a book on her lap. Moving through grief, recognise the divinity within. Ugh. The music from the club was still pounding in my ears. All I wanted was to fall into bed and let the thumping rhythm of it batter me into unconsciousness. Sit down for a moment, she said. Do you want a herbal tea? I shook my head and grudgingly perched on the arm of the couch. I'm worried about you. You and your mum. It's been 6 months. You can't shut yourselves up in here forever. Watch me. You need to be strong for your mum, Ruby. She needs you now more than ever. What did she think I'd been doing for the past 6 months? Who did she think has done the laundry and ordered the food and gone to the dodgy bottle shop in town for cigarettes? Who did she think was making sure the bills got paid? It's natural to grieve when you lose someone, but your mum... Auntie Kath sighed. When you lose someone, lose. People say that a lot when someone dies. I'm sorry for your loss. It makes it sound careless, as if my brother were a door key or umbrella left behind on the train. And the worst part is they're right. I was careless. It was me, my loss. I lost him. Have you spoken to your father? My muscles tensed. This was an ambush. Auntie Kath had carefully avoided mentioning Dad the whole time she'd been here. She knew that Mum wouldn't cope, wouldn't want to hear about him, so she'd waited for an opportunity to get me alone. I swallowed. Auntie Kath reached out and touched my hand. I know it's hard, but no matter what happened, he's still your father. He's grieving too. He needs you. I couldn't look after Mum and Dad at the same time. Don't let this tragedy tear your family apart, said Auntie Kath. She sounded as though she was quoting directly from the horrible book she was reading. What happened was... She shook her head. It was just awful, but it wasn't your father's fault. Was she stupid? I knew that. I knew it wasn't his fault. That's why I hadn't spoken to him. I got up from the couch and walked away. You need to let go, Ruby, said Auntie Kath as I opened my bedroom door. You need to move on. That would never happen. I wouldn't let go. I wouldn't let it happen. I didn't deserve to let go because it was my fault. All of it. It had happened because of me. This sounds like a pretty intense book that deals with some intense ideas, but I really like the writing style. It really draws you in. Please let me know if you would like to borrow a copy of The Boundless Sublime by Lili Wilkinson. We have a copy in our school library in the teenage fiction section. Thanks for listening. See you next time.